All right. Well, thanks a lot, Noel. Appreciate it. So, I'm going to talk a little bit today about some of the projects that we've done with meat plants in Iowa. All the projects that I'm going to talk about are uh, projects that have been done with uh, what you would call small meat plants, locker type plants. Some of them are inspected, some of them are not inspected, or I should reiterate that they're all inspected, but some are official plants where the meat can be sold into commerce. Others are custom plants where uh, uh, meat is not put into commerce. Um, so the first thing we talk about when we're going to do a project with a plant is what is our goal? What are we trying to do? And these plants are businesses, so we always talk about we want to make more money. We want to do it now. We want to do it in the future, um, and we want to do it without jeopardizing our family life, and we want to do it without hurting our employees. And and maybe when I say family life, I mean our personal life. Uh, and oftentimes, what we see is that in these small businesses is the solution is oftentimes just to work harder uh, and make our employees work harder and not necessarily work smarter. So the other thing we talk about is focus, focus, focus. Where should we be focusing our efforts? And oftentimes for us, we find that increasing sales has a significantly better impact on the bottom line than simple cost cutting. Most times, folks are focused on cutting operating costs. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but oftentimes increasing sales will get you much more impact on the bottom line uh, for about the same effort. I mean, everything we do is hard, so why not do the hard stuff that gets you the most results, as I always say. The other thing we do, and I think this is oftentimes a mistake when we this is really when we go into small businesses as well, but there's not a lot of time. There's not time for complicated analysis. Everything that we do has to be relatively simple, easy to explain, and easy to implement. Uh, and we can't do things that require new and fancy capabilities. So, if only we could, target the ready to eat market or whatever. Well, that's not realistic. That we're talking about a significant amount of investment and a whole new suite of capabilities. Doesn't mean that we can't develop those capabilities in that business over time. It just means, our first step is often what are the simple low hanging thing, what's the simple low hanging fruit that we can pick to make more money. So for us, and today I'm going to identify about four different. I'm going to talk about three different interventions that we've taken in Iowa plants and what kind of impacts that we've gotten on the bottom line. I do have some articles on the MPAN website about retail management, so selling into retailers and also managing retail counters better and making more money off of them. I don't think we're going to have time to get to it, um, but we can. But that is available online. So I always called this section the slow season blues. Most plan, and I got a little blues band there. So clip art is my friend. Uh, so many times, this isn't always true for every plant. So these are just things that when I go in and we start talking and we start working together, we try to identify. But many times, meat plants uh, will have a slow season. And Iowa tends to go from like February, March, and even into April a little bit. Really, probably stretches all the way until fair season starts, and fair animals start coming into the plant. The busy season is from fair time all the way to through the deer season, and the slow season is that February, March, April kind of time frame. Um, Couple of things that we find in terms of prerequisites, so maybe let me back up one step. When we have a slow season, that oftentimes can represent a tremendous opportunity to increase profitability of a meat plant. That basically means to me that that plant is operating under capacity at certain times of the year, and that if we can generate cash through additional business, we will make more money. Um, and the questions we asked about during the slow season is laying off staff problematic? There's a big conflict when we start to get into this type of season. Uh, First thing is we have good people, or oftentimes we have good people who are trained, people who know the systems, people who know the food safety side of things, or have an idea what the sanitary standard operating procedures are. We have people who have some tactile meat cutting skills and they probably represent a decent amount of time and investment by the owner or the plant manager. To just lay those people off uh, is usually proves problematic. And when I say that, um, first off, is that person going to come back? If you have anybody good, if you lay them off every year, uh, are they going to like you for that? It's one thing to have it's one thing to have 2 weeks off after a really tough busy season. It's another thing to have 3 months off with no income. So many times meat plants are in this, damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, which is I could lay people off and save money and cash flow my slow season, but then I don't know if I'm ever going to get those people back. The meat plants that I oftentimes work with will just keep those people on, and they'll just struggle through that slow season, trying to pick up business where they can, uh, um, and try to make it, and hopefully you make it up during the busy season. And not hopefully, usually that's how that business is structured. It does make it up during the busy season. They've been doing it for 30 years or however long. So our key learning is you can sell product at below cost, yet still make more money for your plant, especially when your plant is not busy. And that sounds a little weird when we say sell product at below cost. What does that mean? Well, let's unpackage that a little bit. It does not mean sell product at below your raw material cost. We don't want to, we want to factor in what's the cost of the meat, what's the cost of packaging, what's the cost of ingredients. Um, but oftentimes, when you have excess capacity and people are twiddling their thumbs in the plant, there is, you know, you may be selling it quote unquote below your labor cost. Um, you can do that during the slow season. Yeah. So, well, and because labor, you were going to pay that labor anyway. Labor is oftentimes a fixed cost, especially if we're not just going to let people go and fire them willy nilly here and there. People treat labor as a variable cost and they factor that in their cost of production. But the what we found, at least through some of our practical on the ground programs, is that selling it at below your labor cost, as long as it's above your raw material cost, um, you can make more money. So what do we do? And I always like to do examples, but um, and this is just kind of a typical small meat plant. This is not an official plant, so these folks were not. They were just a custom plant. They were not selling. Actually, let me back that up. This was a plant that had inspected retail, so their retail products could enter into commerce, but they were not inspected on the slaughter. Um, I did. I mentioned a little bit, yeah. And in Iowa, we have state inspection, which is meat can enter into commerce, but only within the state. It cannot enter into interstate commerce. Um, so in this plant, February, March, and April, it's very slow every year. On a on a dime, February 3rd rolls around and there's like you look at the schedule and it's crickets, very quiet in the plant. Uh, where phone's not ringing anymore. The stress is over. From the deer season. On the other hand, uh, the individual who ran this plant was very loyal to his employees. He didn't want to let people go. He had good people who knew how to cut meat, and losing good, well-trained people was not something that he was willing to risk. The the plant was not cash flowing very well during this period. It was a real belt tightening time, and it happened every year. Um, and then the other key thing was any new business. The big conflict was, yeah, we could develop new business, but I need to have capacity during the busy season. So any new business that they developed had to be business that was only short-term and or temporary. And the overall solution in our intervention, and this is not a very complicated intervention, but we sent out limited time only advertisements for meat bundles. Pricing was extremely attractive, so not something that you would do during the busy season, perhaps, but something that really got people coming through the door during their slow season. And the results that we got were an increase of $20,000 per month over 3 months, which is significant. The contribution margin, which is sales minus raw materials, was 35%. So when we look at additional cash flow, over 3 months, it was about $21,000 of additional income. And we did a side-by-side comparison between two similar years, and the slow season solution was the difference. One of the reasons why I always talk about $21,000 of additional income or $21,000 of additional cash flow is I wanted to accurately represent the impact on the bottom line. A lot of times, if you look at strict profitability, we can always kind of make it look like, with the depreciation or changes in the way the owner will pay him or herself. You can always kind of make it look like it didn't make any money. So we always focus on additional cash flow in order to judge the impact. And for us, it was $21,000 of additional income. And this was side by side with a year where things were pretty tight. He wasn't paying himself very much, and he was thinking about getting out of the business. But this is something that energized him and kept him going. Some other things, so we did that as a pilot and said, okay, well, that works. That's nice. We enjoyed some extra money, some extra income, keeping our people busy during the slow season. What are the implications of something like this? Well, for us and what we're doing now is, while during the busy season, it's usually very busy, there are weeks here and there where we may not be as busy. And the nice thing oftentimes in our meat locker industry is we can look out into the future and look at our schedule. So this plant might have a schedule. Really, you might have people sometimes they bring 10 beef in and then they'll schedule their next 10 beef next year. In this type of business, the plant owner had the ability to look into the future and see when he was going to be slow. And what we did then was we said, well, we'll do sprint marketing for those weeks where we think we're going to be slow. So we've only got a couple of beef coming in during an otherwise busy time of the year on week X. Let's run another special, and let's keep that plant busy. Let's keep things moving. And we haven't gotten all the numbers in, but some preliminary, looking at the books in a preliminary fashion, it looks like the effect is significant. There's a lot of capacity out there, and finding ways to have short-term sprint, find short-term type sprint business that doesn't interfere with your major busy season hunting business or deer business or whatever, is something that can help plants to be a lot more profitable. Any other should I ask for questions on that, or should I just keep rolling? Okay. Lynn has a question. Okay. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. I was wondering. Okay. Sprint marketing. Lynn asked, is sprint marketing for your producers? No. This is a plant. In this case, this plant was not. This plant was not inspected on slaughter. So what generally happens is these plants will buy in box beef, box pork, and process it into some sort of different form, whatever specialty sausage it is, and that stuff will come out of the commodity or the conventional food system. So it's a secondary. It's a second. Yeah, they were inspected for secondary. They were official inspected for secondary processing, not for slaughter. So the other type of project that we run oftentimes, so when I go in and we work a little bit with plants, the first thing we do is go, well, what's your slow season look like? Are you using all your capacity all the time? And the answer can often be no. And if that's the answer, then the first thing we do is we say, okay, well, let's use all your capacity all the time and see what kind of money that you can make. Um, when that's not necessarily true, there are other things that we can do uh, to increase the capacity of the business without spending too much money. So the conflict oftentimes with meat plants is that I need more capacity to do more business, but in order to do more business, I have to make some sort of enormous capital investment. Is it a new smokehouse, another smokehouse? Do I need to rework my, do some sort of different flow pattern, or do I need another cooler, some enormous cooler, and all that's going to cost with the price tag of $1 million or whatever the number is. Oftentimes, the very significant price tag. And then and when that becomes the case, we start to ask ourselves, well, how are we managing our plant? Is the default way of managing a plant serving us well? And oftentimes, the way plants are being managed, the answer is no. And I always do a little flow line just to give people an example of this is a very simple example of how a meat plant works. Basically, in the immortal words of Ted Nugent, you got to kill it before you grill it. So what I always tell people is, Ted Nugent might sue me for saying that. I probably shouldn't have said that publicly. Um, but what you have is a system of dependent events. So in order to get a finished product at the end of our plant, we have to first kill that animal, kill, gut, split, wash. That animal has to be chilled. It has to go to a fabrication table and have that carcass broken down into various, maybe just primals, but maybe various cuts. And then lastly, trim, different, or different parts of the animal will go into the smokehouse for further processing for specialty products. So we have a system of dependent events, and each one of those events has different capacities. And I always and another thing about all meat plants, and this is true of all meat plants, is there's a general flow of work. So we go from the kill to the smokehouse, and it usually goes one direction. It doesn't go backwards. It's like the barber, right? They can take it off, but they can't put it back on, and that's the way a meat plant works. We can break it down, but we can't put it back together once it's broken down. So with that understanding, um, we talk. I always we start to talk to meat plants, and I always show them this simple flow chart, which is say, well, what is the capacity of this system? And is it 10 widgets or is it 5 widgets? Every other part of this system can process 10 widgets, for example, but one part of this system can only process 5 widgets. Therefore, the overall capacity of the system is only 5 widgets. You can make 10 widgets, you can kill 10 beef, but if you can only break down 4, then it doesn't help you.
We work with 6 different slaughterhouses
Uh-huh.
on a weekly basis,
Mhm.
and they're either at capacity or very near capacity.
Mhm.
Like if I call today to schedule, I would be a month and a half to myself.
Mhm.
With most
Sure.
of the guys.
Sure.
And they're all doing kill 1 or 2 days
Yeah.
per week.
Yep. I know.
Yeah, so you know about this, and I'm just sharing what you're finding in
Yeah.
Michigan.
Yep.
And so I'm sort of corroborating what you're saying.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And it seems like, before I understood this, I thought, well, geez, just add another kill day. But the constraint is what happens after the kill. The kill goes easy and fast. It's how many animals, which is what you're saying, how many animals can you actually break down?
Mhm.
And that's the constraint. We don't
Yep.
have the capacity to do the breakdown
Mhm.
once we do the kill.
Yep.
And that seems to be the constraint.
Mhm.
And there's an interesting solution to that. that western.
Yeah, we got like 15 people.
Oh.
are on the.
And they don't, they're basically.
Well, now I'm nervous.
Sorry.
So if you can just.
Oh, is this appropriate conversation we had?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Is this?
Yeah, we just, right now, they're hearing nothing and they're.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, what did I say?
Introduce yourself.
So, yeah, this is Bill Taylor. I'm with Eat Local, Eat Natural. We're a distributor of proteins in the state of Michigan.
Okay.
And I'm just sharing, for the last couple of minutes, I was sharing what our experience is. We work with 6 processors, slaughterhouses and processors on a weekly basis. And what I was saying is that, and it's really corroborating what, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Nick.
What Nick has been saying is that they are either at capacity or near capacity, every single one of them. And that the constraint, that they usually do a kill either 1 or at most 2 days a week is their kill. And before I understood how this worked, I thought, well, geez, just add another kill day. But in fact, if they add another kill day, they wouldn't have the ability to do the breakdown, because the breakdown is what takes the time. It takes the equipment, and it takes the labor, the personnel, and it takes the space, and that's really what the constraint is. And what's interesting is sort of Western Michigan beef. Byron Center and Western Michigan beef have kind of figured this out by Western Michigan beef does the kill, and Byron Center does the breakdown. And they have, since it's 2 separate companies that work very closely together, in fact, you schedule through Western Michigan beef, and that automatically schedules you through Byron Center. So it's easy for the customer, like me, and they seem to have figured it out so that they don't have that kind of constraint. So they've got a pretty sizable, small but sizable processing facility, and the kill is only focused on the kill. And I still think that they're only killing 2 days a week, but they can slaughter enough animals that keeps, Byron Center, the processor, busy with, I don't know, I'm guessing they got 20 people full-time cutting meat.
Just breaking down.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's useful or helpful to understand.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
And Nick, you're gonna probably segue into.
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And you weren't, and I will say that I wouldn't say that you were necessarily, when you say add another day, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's something that we do a lot, actually. And I'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll use an example from a plant we worked with in north central Iowa. So going off that, I always ask the question, well, what would happen if process C didn't work up to capacity? So if we only end up killing, if we can only process 4 at C, then we can never catch up. That represents lost capacity for the entire plant. So C has to work at capacity all the time in order to make the plant work at its top potential. I talked a little bit earlier about the default management style, and what is that? And so maybe people would be asking, well, what are you talking about? And the answer is that the default management style in most plants is make everybody work all of the time. If a worker doesn't work, we are losing money on him or her, and minimize labor and setups. It should be everywhere. It reads anywhere, but everywhere. So if a worker is setting up machines, the assumption is we are losing money on him or her. And when we work with plants, we ask the question, well, is this true? Should everybody be working all the time? Should we always be minimizing our setups, minimizing cleanups, things like that? And the truth is we believe no, that's probably not the right, that's almost never the right solution. And I have a little example of what happens when we keep people busy. And this guy in the upper left-hand corner would be the owner or the manager. He's on his phone looking at it. I don't know. It's clip art. It's clip art. Forgive me for my clip art. Yeah, I know. Somebody got on me about the clip art the other day. They didn't like it, but so forgive me for my clip art. But this is a good illustration. What happens is, at process B, I'm not doing anything. Well, someone at D goes, well, I need help. We got a lot of work over here. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to work. So you move that person over, and work starts to build up, and that nobody's processing at C, which represents the capacity of the system. It's the constraint, and they say, well, there's no work to process, and A needs help. Manager goes, oh, don't go stand around. I don't want you standing around. You got to work. I pay you to work. Okay, you got to move. Okay, I'm going to work over here now. Then they don't have any work. Then what happens? Well, the system itself is starved. Everybody at D and E, they don't have any work to process. And then the customer calls, where's my order? It's stuck at C. And this is what happens over and over again. So then the next thing would be, well, the foreman, what is going on here?
You got a heavy finger.
I guess. Excuse me. And what would end up happening is the foreman would send everybody over to C, and everybody would be working overtime at C to make sure all the work that built up goes through. And this is the type of chaos that continues in the plant. This is why oftentimes meat plants are very stressful places to work. I've worked with meat plants where during the busy season, there are fist fights that break out on the floor because everybody is so stressed out and having such a tough time. And then I have the guy, he has the nuclear explosion, So, this is the type of stress that's going on. The other thing that's happening is waves of work that go through the system. And this is the batching problem. And when you go into plants, a lot of times they're going to say, well, my bottleneck is moving around all of the time. I have a constraint, but it's everywhere. I need a new plant. I have to build an entirely new plant because I don't have enough capacity anywhere to do any of the work that we need to do. And a lot of times the problem with that, and this goes back to the batching problem, is we'll kill 1 day a week. We'll kill 2 days a week. Did it start over again? No. Excuse me. How do we do this here? I'm going to try to catch up again. So, yep, sure, that'd be great. We would, a big problem that we continue to run into is, so if we're only killing 1 or 2 days a week, we create this wave of artificial work. If I kill beef, once a week, and I kill 10 beef a week, all those beef move through my plant, and they slam each process, right? So the first day, the cooler is slammed, right? We can't get any more meat in here. I don't have a big enough cooler. Next day, I'm working overtime on the cutting table because we're breaking all that beef down. I got to break that beef down over the next 2 or 3 days. Oh, well, then the next day I don't have enough capacity in the sausage kitchen to do all this. And that's what continues to happen. I always tell people, keep the waves at the beach. Don't go surfing through your plant. That's for vacation. That's not for now. But when you do big batches, it creates an emergency that flows through your plant. Think of it like a snake swallowing a golf ball. There's this huge load of work that goes through this plant, and that creates what we find is that creates stress. It creates overtime, higher costs, and all the things that we don't like. So you combine that with moving people around all the time, this management style that says everybody has to be busy all the time. Then you combine that with big batches. Oh, we don't want to do any more cleanups than absolutely necessary. And you have this recipe for chaos. You have this recipe for overtime. And what we say is we do things a little bit differently. So what we find is, first off, if you're managing in that way, you're probably squandering capacity. Not always. We always have to talk about a real situation. So there could be situations where that's not true, but oftentimes we're squandering capacity that we do have in our plant, and we're creating unneeded stress and overtime. So we talk about, having a personal life, things like that, things that are, having places and outlets other than work to recharge, so we don't get burned out in the plant. All those things, tie into this. So this is an example of a north central Iowa plant. And I want to stress that the bottleneck will be different in every plant. The underlying principles are the same for every plant. We have a general direction of flow. We have, you got to kill it before you grill it. So we have a series of dependent events. Every plant in some way operates the same way. Now, how all those how those plants operate, might be a little bit different. So the bottleneck could be anywhere based on how the plant is set up and the facilities in the plant. Um, so this is an example of a plant in northeast Iowa, or this would be north central Iowa, and this is a project that we did a few years back, and typical. You walk in the plant, typical thing, very high stress. Owner wants to close the plant down because it's just not making the money she thought she was going to make. Wanted to, you know, it was so much work. Had a goal to bring some children into the business, but didn't really feel like she could because, you know, she really didn't want to. She wouldn't wish to plant on a snake. I think is kind of what it was. I think she actually, and I quote, she said that. Um, so, and and the first thing we do when we're trying to find excess capacity is we say, well, where is this bottleneck? Where's the constraint in the system? Um, and we um, and it was hard to find that because we had this wave of work syndrome going on through the plant. Everybody's moving around. We're killing once a day. So the first day, nobody's really doing much, and everything's in the cooler, chilling, waiting to come out. Day two, the cutting table's slammed, and we're off to the races, kind of thing. So I think she would kill on Monday, everything go in the cooler, and then down the line, we had this problem. So the cooler, on Tuesday she thought she needed a bigger cooler. On Wednesday she thought she needed better people, new people, more people, and then on Friday we need a new sausage kitchen. Got to revamp the whole thing. So her feeling was we just can't. We just can't. We need a new plant. We need to build. We need to do something. So what we did is, we saw this shifting bottleneck. We thought, well, this is probably waves of work going through the plant. So we said, let's move to a daily slaughter to smooth flow through the plant. And when we moved to daily slaughter, we started to see where the actual bottleneck was, and I think we found at that time that it was in the cooler. So the next step is, well, okay, so what do we do now? We know where this constraint is. How are we going to change the plant? What kind of actions do we need to take? Well, I think when we showed you before, we have this general flow line, and there's a constraint in that plant. Once we found that constraint, um, it's we know that we can only, this is what's governing the output of our plant. So we need to make sure that we're always maximizing that plant. So because we knew that the cooler was a constraint, we set up systems that were designed to keep the cooler full at all times. So, we were killing X amount of animals a day, and that was based on what we could fit in the cooler. Um, you know, there's always problems with customers not showing up. She had a little feed yard in the back, and there was always a buffer of animals ready to slaughter, so that the cooler was full. So every time they pulled an animal out of the cooler, they replaced it with another carcass. Um, then the other question was, well, how do we squeeze more dollars out of the system? So, okay, we understand our capacity. We can only do this much a week, um, but is there something else that we can do to get more out of the cooler, which was governing our system? And our solution was to choose hogs because they moved faster through the system. They moved through the cooler faster, and they could generate cash for the business faster. So it was always, let's look for hogs. Let's look for, instead of beef. Um,
So she was slaughtering then a couple hours every day,
mm-hmm.
and and the USDA they facilitated that. The inspector, there was no problem.
She was a custom locker.
Oh, got it.
We'll talk about an inspected locker as well, though. I have another.
Does everybody know what a custom locker means? Just,
Yes, we should. Yeah. So a cut. Yeah. So this was a custom locker. It's true that they were just slaughtering a couple hours every day. In fact, the slaughter guy didn't have a lot to do. And this is the difference between managing to keeping everybody busy and managing to, and even at the same time, it was a lot smoother flow work through the cutting table and back into the sausage kitchen. people weren't working nearly as hard, but the plant was putting more out overall because we didn't have this chaos. The other thing is, and I'll get to some of the results here, but um, what we ended up doing is we never accept more animals than the constraint can process. So we know this is what we can put through the cooler. And what it meant is that people are idle. And I bold this because everybody working all the time is not. We're managing to make more money, put more cash to the plant, get paid for more animals. We're not managing to make everybody work all the time. That doesn't necessarily make you money. Um, it's okay if it's a non-constraint. If it's not the cooler and they're not working all the time, they shouldn't by definition because the cooler has the least capacity in the system. In this case, in this particular case. So if it's a non-constraint resource and there are people there and they may be standing around a little bit or working real slow, that's okay. Everybody in the entire plant was focused on keeping the cooler full, not working all the time. The other thing is employees will automatically start to, if you're being managed on how much you work, if that's how you're being judged, and every time you stop, somebody hassles you, then you're just going to find work to do. And you're going to move around, you're going to do things. And if you've been working that way for the last 15 years, then, so what we had to do is say, look, the cooler is what governs the output of the plant. The cooler is what makes us money, or is what limits, or keeping the cooler full is what's going to make us the most money. Everybody needs to understand that, so that they're not just, their question is the cooler full? Okay, we're doing a good job. Is the cooler not full? Then maybe we're not doing a good job. And then these are the results. And I quote, my accountant can't believe it. They were killing. The sales were up 30%, and it was custom business. Her stress decreased. Everybody's stress decreased. Overtime was very rarely used, and of course, when we're not paying all this overtime, what ended up happening is you can pay people more per hour. A lot of times, folks will set a wage in a meat plant based on the kind of overtime they're going to work. I'm going to end up paying you this much over the course of a year. And you're going to work, an enormous amount of overtime during the busy season and less during the slow season. Um, so so people could be paid more hourly, but work less and maybe make a similar amount of money. Um, and then, of course, a new family was finally brought in to take over the business. Not really to improve the business. Um, I think this guy figured I don't want to mess with anything. I don't want to break anything. So we'll just let it keep going as it's going. But she had the cash flow then with that increased sales to pay her son to come into the business. And again, going with the theme of increasing capacity, not investment. We thought we needed a new cooler. Um, Truth is, we just needed to use the cooler up to its full capacity to improve the business. Didn't necessarily need to take make risky capital investments. Um, they didn't hire anybody new. They didn't put any infrastructure in. What does end up happening a little bit is when you start making more money, you get that sausage kitchen. You get that that grinder you always wanted, or that sausage stuffer you always wanted, but no major overhauls to the plant or anything like that. Third intervention we've kind of developed in Iowa is we do a lot of work with off-matrix hogs. And when I say off-matrix hogs, I mean hogs that don't quite fit in the regular packer system. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And these are generally conventional hogs. But we started this project with the desire to promote our local lockers. How do we get more business into our local lockers? Maybe we're finding more capacity through some other projects that we've done. How do we start using this capacity to help our folks do better financially? Most of the time, finding lots of new business is, generally speaking, not very easy. Small plants are relatively inefficient as compared to a large plant for an integrator. Like we were talking this morning, JBS Swift, they might there's a hog kill plant in Marshalltown, Iowa. They might kill 20,000 hogs or 18,000 hogs in a day, or 20,000 hogs in a day. We don't have our small meat plants are not going to be able to hit the type of price points for processing fees that those plants are gonna hit, and we don't want them to hit that. That's not what they do. Uh, so for the the next challenge, of course, is if we want to get into larger, more competitive markets where price points are difficult to hit, um, we need to find significant cost savings. But we really can't take it out of our plants. That's not what we want, right? We're trying to bring money back into the community. We're trying to promote the financial success of our plants. So, so bringing these hogs, or trying to take it out of the plant and making them process it cheaper. There's probably a little bit of room for that, but um, certainly not enough room. There's really nowhere to go there. Um, the other thing is we promote lockers because it helps our farm community as well. Iowa's a farming state. I work in a very rural area. We don't really want to back cost savings back into the farm gate as well. So this is the challenge that we're continually facing. It's like, well, we can't take it out of the plant. We can't take it out of the farmer. Where's this money going to come from? And the key assumption in that, challenge is every hog has equal value to the packer. And what we found is, no, that's not true. There are belly ruptures, small hogs, large hogs, slow hogs, a lot of hogs that just don't fit into the packer system. A belly rupture is a prime example. There is probably nothing wrong with that hog, but the packer will dock a farmer for that hog. They will not get paid full price for that hog. So what we find is as the system gets bigger, more consolidated, and more quote unquote efficient, the crumbs that fall off that system get bigger and bigger and bigger. Because that system is only designed to do a 260, 270 pound hog. That's exactly what the specs the packer are looking for. And they have a little bit of, it's a matrix, right, usually on how those hogs are judged, but for the most part, a lot of those hogs, they will dock you significantly at the packer. Of course, the question is which plants are capable of processing these hogs, and it is our small plants. They move slower. They can, belly ruptures are not a problem. They can cut around those types of things, and they can preserve hogs that don't fit into this packer system much better and put out a great product. You can set up programs that are very competitive. Markets that were generally off limits are now fair game. We developed a institutional hog program for a couple of institutions for these would be major companies, major food service companies that you've probably heard of. And of course, we do all this locally, sourcing born, raised, processed in Northeast Iowa. And we develop local hog markets that were generating about $14,000 a month of sales and cash flow for the overall program at about $9,000 a month. We did that in about a month. We figured out how to do that. And there are other markets in the pipeline. So this is a very, very successful program. This has been something that inspected lockers who have the capacity to do these types of things, especially if we do some of these other projects, can be very, very successful and make plants a lot more money, and keep things rolling. So, but do have some other solutions, some other things that we've done for retail meat counters, and then retail distribution solutions, some things that we've done with folks that have been successful. You can read about those on MPAN. I think I've talked enough. So, yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Have I bored everybody?
No. Actually, I have some questions about the off matrix hog program.
Sure. Yep.
So you went to, it sounds like sizable farms,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And you said, hey, the hogs that don't fit the criteria that the, this big processing facility will take them.
Yep.
And did you take them at a lower price than what they were selling?
Yeah, and I should have made that. That wasn't a very. Yeah, I should have made that. Should have made that complete. Specific. What's the word I'm looking for? Clear. Should have made that clear. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Rich. Really appreciate that. So oftentimes those hogs, when they send those hogs to the packer, about half those hogs they don't get paid for. They go somewhere else. And basically or maybe even more than half of those hogs. Or maybe they don't even send them because they know they won't fit, like especially a belly rupture, that probably isn't going to fit. And they know they're going to get docked. So I'll pay half price maybe for those hogs. For a hog that they'd never be able to sell. So basically those hogs either go into even more down and dirty markets where they don't get paid as much, or and actually I think right now we're paying more than half price from market, but it's a significant discount whatever it is. So for our farmers who are selling into larger markets, oftentimes when you whether you've got maybe you're marketing conventional hogs, so you've got hoops or maybe you've got buildings. When you clean those buildings out, 3 to 5% of those hogs. That's based on Michigan State research. I actually got that out of a Michigan State article. 3 to 5% of those hogs don't quite fit in the packer system. In Iowa, we're putting in. I would assume in Michigan, in the upper Midwest, we're putting a lot of hogs through these systems. So there's all these hogs that don't fit. There are actually businesses that source hogs. There's hog buying stations. We have a company called Lynch Livestock that does, a lot of the roaster pigs that you might see are small hogs that didn't fit in the packer system kind of thing. Yep, no problem. So yeah, we'll source those hogs at a significant discount. It's a win for the farmer because those are hogs they either wouldn't have gotten paid for or might have gotten paid for, but don't want to send it on the truck because they're not quite sure. The plant gets to process lots of hogs, so they're very happy, and they're taking their fees and things like that. And the customer is getting a really a great product at a price that's competitive with where they would be buying off the truck. So for us, we always bill it as a good first step towards buying local for institutional customers. A lot of times who don't really want to buy it. Well, I won't. I should be careful how I say that, but a lot of times they're not as conducive because the sticker shock from a sustainable side of pork or whatever they're doing just isn't the right. It's just not the right fit for them under their current economic constraints. So that's a lot of times who they are.
So there were 2 questions up there.
Yeah.
Okay.
One from Lynn and one from Sonia there.
Yes.
I want to read whatever.
Okay. Yep. Let's see. Which one are we on?
So maybe 4 lines up there. Lynn Brown is interested in retail solutions and distribution. If there's any time, and we are about at time.
Are we about at time?
We can, we can kind
Yep.
of carry on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whatever.
Okay, well, I can talk a little bit about retail solutions. So we got about 3 questions here. There's one about small processors trying to increase cost margins. There's another one regarding packaging. I'll start with the retail solutions. I'll do a really brief outline of what that is, and maybe I'll just hit on 3 points. When we serve retailers, there is a lot of variability in demand. So, and I'll give you an example. In a project we did with lettuce, and it's not meat, but it's a perishable product, so we'll use this as a proxy. We sold anywhere between 2 units in a week and 22 units in a week. That's the kind of for fresh clamshell lettuce. That's the kind of variability that we saw. The other thing is I have not yet met anybody who can tell the future, unfortunately. I have met a few people, but I'm not sure if they can do it. They say they can. They want me to give them money to tell the future, but it doesn't seem to work. Um, so with those two facts in mind, we have lots of variability. We could sell 2 or 22 in a week, um, and we're dealing with a perishable product. The old joke in grocery stores is sell it or smell it. Um, and we can't tell the future. So in any given week, we are not exactly sure whether we're going to have a 22 unit week or a 2 unit week. Um, and the key problem in retailers is we're dealing with a new product. We're dealing with maybe a product that's higher priced if we're doing some sort of antibiotic free or some sort of value added pork or beef or whatever that product is. Um, the retailer is in this struggle, and the struggle is, do I have enough on hand to satisfy my customers, or do I have enough on hand only to minimize my losses, right? So if I can't tell the future and I don't know exactly how much I'm going to need on any given week, I could buy 22, but chances are I'm only going to sell 12, and I'll have to carry over product to the next week, and it won't be as fresh. Or on the other hand, I could try to buy the average, but the week that I buy the average, that's the week that they want 22. And I got a bunch of customers coming in who can't buy it. I'm disappointing my customers. So retailers oftentimes they're schizophrenic, and they have to go back and forth between, oh, I'm going to have a lot of product on hand, or I'm going to have almost no product. And then the next week they're like, I got to get rid of this product. And the reason why they're doing it is because they have to carry enough product to account for variability, account for problems in the supply chain, like if I don't get my delivery or something happens, I got to have enough to make sure everybody's satisfied. And that product represents risk because A, it could perish, it's perishable. B, it represents cash flow if I'm holding on to product for a long time. Our overall solution has been to deliver smaller quantities more frequently. What we do is we reduce case sizes, uh, and we create systems where we're delivering twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, um, or every day. Daily delivery is the goal. Um, Not always possible, depending on the type of volume that you're moving into to individual retailers. But oftentimes, if you have 20 to 30 products that you're selling, and you have 10 or 15 retail customers, and you have small, appropriately sized transportation, you can uh, make that cash flow, and you see tremendous increases in sales, tremendous increases in cash flow. The other thing is when you create a system where the retailer doesn't have to take on very much. If the retailer doesn't have to take on very much inventory, they have almost no risk, which means they're very, very, very open to taking new products, taking your whole line, expanding your line for new products. If they only have to take on 5 pounds or a case at a time, they don't feel the same amount of risk as, oh, I get a delivery once every 2 weeks and I got to bring in 10 cases or something like that. So we find with that service platform, we make significant improvements in the bottom line for both the retailer. It's a win for the retailer, and it's also a win for the plant, even though you have higher transportation costs. The increased cash flow more than accounts for the higher costs.
I think I can comment on the packaging issues.
Well, sure. Yeah, go ahead,
We
please.
have
Please.
a lot of learning that has gone on for us with regard to packaging quality. And with the processors, so the landscape in Michigan is that there is, I'm going to use technical terms in terms of packaging. Yeah, okay. So in terms of packaging, there's a couple processors that are really good at it, a couple that are good at it, and the rest are really bad. Okay, and those are technical terms. right? So what we've done through trial and error is discover which ones that we can use for our restaurant customers, right? Which doesn't have to have good labeling, doesn't have to have good packaging. So we know that we can have these animals brought to these facilities, and we know which ones for retail have to go to these other processors. And I really think there's only 2 or 3 really good processors that provide good packaging. And so just through trial and error, we've discovered how to manage that. The other couple factors are, I have some customers who actually want frozen, and it doesn't matter who that goes to, because everybody can do frozen packaging. For retail, you've got to be vacuum packed, and not everybody does vacuum packing. Okay, you've got to be vacuum packed so you can get 10 to 14 days shelf life. The cryovacs, I can sell that to retailers, but they know it's going to be frozen, and you have to keep it frozen because it's just not going to last on your shelf. Okay. With regard to labels, the labeling basically sucks. And we have created our own branding and our own labeling for retail. Now we don't do that labeling for restaurants, but for retailers, we've spent our own creative and funds to create our own labels, and we tend to highlight the farm with these labels. So the processor has to have their label on it, with all their safe handling information and their dates and what it is and all of that. And then we'll put our own label on it as well, so that it does end up looking, pleasing at retail. And we've seen a big pickup in sales at retail by going to the right processors, getting the 10 to 14 day, vacuum packed shelf life, and by putting our own labels on it. And that's been pretty successful for us. But there's cost involved. There's cost involved in our putting labels on stuff. There's cost in travel because, we're going out to Grand Rapids from Ann Arbor to pick stuff up because that's where the good packaging is, or up to Eagles, so we meet them in Ithaca to pick up our product. So there's cost involved in doing this, but you get a good product.
And I don't know that much about packaging, so I'll stop there. So
Can you
that's
just say
not
again
mine.
where you're from and
Oh yeah. So this is Bill Taylor, and I'm the owner with Eat Local, Eat Natural. We distribute proteins to retailers and restaurants in Grand Rapids, Lansing, Kalamazoo, Ann Arbor, and Detroit.
Great. I think maybe if you want to follow up with Sonia's question here, she's asking about specifically about education for small processors on ways to increase cost margins, and it looks like she's asking a little bit about animal welfare issues like handling and how that affects meat quality.
Okay. I have not worked specifically on humane handling, so I would not. I don't think I can speak to that in any way that you would want to hear, at least. In terms of improving improving margins and improving meat plant operation. Thinking about it from that constraint perspective before, we do work improving certain processes. And a lot of times our work improving those processes is after we've identified a constraint and we see what's governing the capacity of our system, we'll focus on the cutting table or the cooler or the slaughter floor or whatever that is in order to improve that specific operation so that we can put more through the plant. In terms of increasing margins, we're not really necessarily trying to save labor as much as increased capacity. And sometimes what that means is when we increase capacity, we can lower our prices, maybe attract different business, more business, but still make more money overall because we've improved the business or the speed at which we can move product through. For example, if we're working with someone who's selling into retailers, they need a certain service platform, they need certain price points because, Bill, your customers want a certain price. A plant might work with me to say, well, how do I service this customer? I want to get into this business, but I don't know how to. This is what I think my cost is. And what we try to do first is throw out this cost of production idea and say, go back to what's the capacity of the system? Are we using all our capacity as best as we can? And how do we generate more cash overall? So instead of trying to go to each little process and try to save a little bit of labor or a little bit of time, we don't do any of that. We just find the constraint, improve the process overall. If we've broken the constraint, we've improved the cutting table to a point where now the constraint's in the cooler. Then the next step is to how do we improve the cooler? How do we use the cooler better? How do we do this? And we just focus on all those different things. So I always try to avoid the increase our cost margin. Does that help you at all, Sonia? Or did I talk too much and chase my tail? Some, thanks. All right, I'll take it, Sonia. Thanks. Is there one more question then?
Yeah, let's see here. We talked about packaging.
Oh, and how many processors have a retail counter? Any insight? Retail sales, both fresh and frozen. Yes. Yeah, almost everybody will have a retail counter. One of the reasons why we did projects on the retail counter is there is research out of, I believe, Texas A&M. They did some research, some economists down there, and I wish I could think of their name right off the top of my head, but they said that a big chunk of every meat plant's business is that retail counter. So we focused on that a little bit to see if we could improve it. In terms of how we improve the retail counter, again, there's an article on MPAN, but basically it's keeping products in stock more often. Oftentimes, if you go into a plant, you've got that special sausage that you like. They've got this, they're known for their brats, so they're known for their jerky. You go in there and guess what you can't buy? Their jerky. It's out of stock. Well, how do we keep products in stock more consistently? Oftentimes, these plants are destination places for people as well. So, once you get somebody in the door, they might buy a lot. The more we have in stock, the more things that we can sell them, the more cash we can generate off of each customer that comes in. We find that the out of stock impact is significant, hard to measure, but very significant. We find 100%. In one project, we had like 100% increase in the profitability of the retail section, just based on more reactive replenishment. So the big intervention is, instead of waiting for everything to be out of stock and then putting an order into the sausage kitchen, you check every week, see how much is in stock, and then do a smaller batch into that retail. Make a smaller batch of that product and just replenish it more frequently. Basically the same concept as the retail sales, but tweaked for a meat plant counter. So, what are the percent?
Looks like Tina and
Okay.
Jen are addressing the question about low stress handling.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
What's PSA? Excuse me?
Pale soft exhausted. It's very pale. Yeah, was up the strap.
It's what you don't want.
Yeah, right.
And then
Something you stress hormones.
So do we have a question?
And then Lynn asks, what percentage of sales are fresh versus frozen for destination plants? I do not know. I have no idea.
So there's a question from Tim Redmond.
Oh,
Is that on there?
Yeah.
Tim Redmond.
Are there any sources of information that suggest the lower costs of opening a cutting and packaging facility, and also for opening costs for butcher shop meat store?
Well, there's that was work that Arian did. There is a, I don't know if we would call it lower end minimal initial cost project, but Iowa State and the Leopold Center with Arian Taboomery, who was I think an extension associate at the time when that was done, or was he graduate?
And was the co-lead for MPAN.
And he was the was the co-lead for MPAN. If you go on the MPAN website, there is guide to building a red meat processing facility. So small scale meat locker. That'll give you a lot of ideas on where to start and who to call. I think it's geared for Iowa, but that being said, there's a lot of great stuff in there that anybody can use.
What's the resource? Could you say it again?
It's guide for building a red meat slaughter and processing.
It's a slaughter.
Yeah,
Slaughter plant.
slaughter plant.
And it's
Yeah.
small scale.
Slaughter.
Yep.
And it's the complete design.
Yeah.
Is there anything on, Tim is my partner, by the way.
Oh,
The reason
okay.
he's asking this question is because we see that the constraint out there is the processing, not the kill.
Mhm.
And so what we're looking at doing is opening up our own processing.
Like a cut and wrap
facility.
kind of thing.
A cut and wrap, exactly.
Okay.
And so that's what Tim is really asking about. Is there any guidance we can get on putting a cut and wrap facility together?
I still think that guide would help you. You just skip over the
Got it.
slaughter design considerations and go straight to the other part of the thing. But it's probably the best.
Okay.
Arian did a great job with it. It's one of the best resources I've
And
seen.
who
Yeah.
put this out?
Well, it was Leopold and Iowa State.
Yeah.
And
State? Okay.
yeah, and
ISU extension. you can
ISU
find it on-
extension,
Okay, great.
and you can download it off of MPAN.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I told Nolan, you need to get the MCAN website up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's up. I'm gonna split it up again.
Now, what's MP?
It's
Yeah, well,
NM. Yeah, here I.
no, they put it up on the,
Okay.
I'll bring it up again.
Arian,
Taboomery.
that's how you spell it. Oh, God, I would have never gotten that.
Yeah.
No, it's just.
Yeah. NMPAN is the.
Great.
I guess I pronounce it MPAN. I don't know how to. NPAN. NMPAN. I don't know, but.
I'm gonna go look. I actually may have a copy of the meat plan.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do we have any questions?
Yep. Are there any other questions? And I think will my contact information be available?
Yes.
Yes. If you guys have any questions, I always like to chat with people, or if you guys have other ideas, I always like to learn from people as well. We're always learning. So, if you have things I should change about what I said, that too, I appreciate constructive feedback and criticism as well. So, all of the above.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. Did you want to,
And we'll
you just want to type it?
Yes.
We'll,
and
we'll
we'll,
have
we'll share next time
yeah.
with the recording.
Nick's just sharing his email address if anyone needs to contact him directly, but we will, we have recorded this session, so we will get it up on the Centre for Regional Food Systems website so that you can share this with others. So if there's no other questions, I think we'd like to thank Nick very much for coming from Iowa to present on both food hubs and meat processing. So thank you, Nick. And assuming no other, we'll close for the day. Thank you very much.
Good, I'm gonna cough. I'm sorry, that will-